Brazil's top prosecutor says its former President Jair Bolsonaro has been charged over a plot to overturn his 2022 election loss. The former president's accused of systemic attacks on Brazil's electoral system and approving an assassination plot against the current president, Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva. Let's get more on this story with Alandre Brandao, a former Brazilian criminal lawyer and now lecturer at the University of New South Wales. Alexandra, good to have you on the program. Now, if the Brazilian prosecutor has laid these charges, can we assume that there is a wealth of evidence to take action against the former president?
Well, yes, of course, this has to be tried in court, but the charges that the prosecutor has levied are quite substantial. They allege that the defendants were part of an armed criminal organization, and that includes not only former President Bolsonaro, his former head of Brazilian intelligence agents, his chief of staff, his VP candidate and former government minister, his justice minister, among others. And they're accused of integrating an armed criminal organization, attempting to depose the duly elected government and trying to end Brazil's democracy and the rule of law in the country.
Now,
it's important to note that, sorry.
Yeah, yes. Please carry on. I was going to ask you who actually constitutes this, armed criminal organization you're talking about in Brazil. Who are these people?
So these people are all sort of surrounding Bolsonaro. So they're former ministers. They were then active members of the military as well. And this, according to Brazil's prosecutor general, is sort of a multi-pronged strategy throughout a couple of years. So it started allegedly in 2021 through the use of constant disinformation during official broadcasts and social media. They were basically levying charges of election fraud, judicial overreach, and attacks to the Supreme Court. But this has constantly evolved. Prosecutors allege that it didn't stop right there, but that type of disinformation was coupled with a plan to strategically disobey the Supreme Court, the use of federal police to map out regions of the country where Lula was popular and actively stop people in those areas from voting on election day. They also financed, or they're accused of financing pro-coup encampments in front of military installations. After the elections, they allegedly planned to arrest and kidnap Lula, as you mentioned, in addition to justices of the Supreme Court. And finally, they actually drafted and planned sort of pseudo-legal justifications for all these measures. This, again, with the aim of stopping Lula from taking the oath of office, keeping Bolsonaro in power, but also trying to gain some type of legal legitimacy to these sort of extraordinary and criminal measures.
So now that the charges are laid, what are the next steps in terms of the judicial process?
Well, because of such significant charges and because of the nature of the crimes involved, these crimes will be tried directly in the Brazilian Supreme Court, which is the highest court in Brazil. So the first step right now is at the very beginning of the process is the court will examine these charges and the evidence sort of presented initially, and they will find if there is enough evidence to continue. Now, this is a very sort of run-of-the-mill decision. It's quite a standard, and the burden of proof is quite low. It's a very low bar. So it is very likely that charges will be accepted and the proceedings of the trial will begin.
Yes, of course, that begs the question at the moment. He's not been arrested. Why is that the case, given the charges are so serious, including an alleged assassination plot?
Yes, so Bolsonaro has actually been the subject of multiple restrictive measures, which are sort of substitute to arrest prior to him actually being convicted, and this has occurred throughout the years. Now, it's incumbent on the prosecution to actually ask for him to be arrested prior to trial. They apparently have not done so yet. We actually don't know. They may have done this request. They may have requested this, and the court hasn't released these documents or this requested. It's not public. They may have, they may not have. We'll know in the next few days.
Yes. And do you think we'll see a response by Bolsonaro's supporters, given what we saw in 2023 when they stormed the presidential palace?
Well, yes, I think Brazil is quite a divided society currently. On the one hand, I think there will be people that feel some type of relief and even jubilation because many Brazilians have, the alleged facts are widely known, and a significant number of them have been calling for Bolsonaro to be held accountable for those actions. Now, when it comes to Bolsonaro supporters, and he has many, he lost the election for only around 2% of the vote in 2022. I think it's important to remember that Brazil was under a military dictatorship between 64 and 85. And Bolsonaro is the political heir of the dictatorship. He has continually praised that dictatorship's actions, including its torture regime, the 64 coup, and other human rights violations. So in this context, I don't think these charges and these allegations coming to light will damage his popularity among his supporters. They may stage some type of demonstration. That is true. Having said that, I think Bolsonaro, in terms of his electoral future, I think he's barred from running until 2030. He has already been barred from running by Brazil's electoral court. So he legally has no actual electoral future. Now, if he is convicted of all these charges, however, he could be sentenced to over 30 years in prison. So he has a lot of stake. So he might try to mobilize his supporters.
Yes, okay, really interesting insights into the story. Alandre Brandao, thank you so much for your time.
Thanks for having me.